you're anything like me, and I suspect you are, and that's why you're here, you watch with perhaps great interest as the Golden Globes unfolded on Sunday night. Or if you didn't watch it as it unfolded on CBS, perhaps you've caught up with the news afterwards since then and seen who were the winners and losers of that night. And this might be a little unfair because how can you be a big loser if you've been nominated for multiple Golden Globes? I would say you really you either way you win, right? I mean, you're there, you've earned these nominations on a big stage like the Golden Globes, the predecessor to the Oscars. It's award season and you are being celebrated. So honestly, and I really mean this, I mean either way, you come home with the award or you don't, you win because what wonderful recognition, whether you win or lose. You've been recognized with this nomination as a master of your craft. And justifiably so in the case of A Complete Unknown. My criticism of the film's narrative aside, I have effusively praised much of the acting in the film, which I think by and large was brilliant. Chalamet gets all the praise, and I'm going to suggest in a moment that that might be part of the problem for this film in award season. In retrospect, and having taken in the results of the Golden Globes, overshadowing, I think, as I've said on prior videos, the brilliance surrounding him throughout this film. Ed Norton is a veteran's veteran, much like Adrian Brody, although Norton's work goes back even further than Brody's. Monica Barbaro is brilliant as Joan Baez. Elle Fanning is brilliant as Suze Rotolo, although at Dylan's request, as we've discussed in prior videos, her name is changed to Sylvie Russo. You have some of the other big ones. The Johnny Cash role by Boyd Holbrook is just incredible. And then we cannot overlook Scoot McNairy as the non-communicative Woody Guthrie, dying of a nerve disease in the hospital. Just a role in which Scoot wasn't able to say anything. Because Woody Guthrie, by that point in his life, had been robbed of the ability to speak. So, talk about the challenges facing Scoot in a role like that. When as I've said in prior videos, he's had to do things, use his body in ways to communicate things that the other actors didn't have to struggle to do. Scoot McNairy and Boyd Holbrook, in my opinion, were just outstanding. So, again, my criticism of the film's narrative aside, I was thrilled to see A Complete Unknown earn 3 nominations for Golden Globes and disappointed to see that it won none of them. There's nothing to gloat about here from this critic of the film. No, not at all. I am a big Dylan fan. I would love nothing more than to see this film celebrated as much as possible with some victories in an award show as high profile as the Golden Globes. I certainly would love to see it win some Oscars because to me that seems like an opportunity for Dylan's legacy to endure for perhaps generations to come, for Dylan and his work to be exposed to a younger audience. I'd be thrilled. But I think there are some specific reasons why A Complete Unknown came away empty-handed with respect to actual victories in this Golden Globes Awards show. And I think to some extent has nothing to do with the film. It has to do with circumstances beyond the control of anyone involved with this production, for reasons we'll get into. Here's what UltimateClassicRock.com had as the basics of the situation facing A Complete Unknown on what perhaps to some extent can be described as a disappointing night for Timothee Chalamet, for director James Mangold, and perhaps for Ed Norton, who was nominated for his role as Pete Seeger. UltimateClassicRock.com puts it this way: the Bob Dylan biopic A Complete Unknown was shut out at the Golden Globes, losing all 3 of the categories in which it was nominated. Snubbed. Nominated 3 times, came away with a goose egg. Expectations were understandably high for the film entering the night, perhaps too high, as we're going to get into. Perhaps the buzz was a little too intense for Hollywood's taste heading into the Golden Globes, and maybe that could perhaps turn out to be part of this film's problem when it comes to the Oscars. I'll get into that in a minute. Understandably high expectations, especially for its star Timothee Chalamet, playing the lead role as Bob Dylan, who has generated substantial awards buzz for his portrayal of the icon. Many odds makers had the 29-year-old as the favorite to take home Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama. However, the award instead went to Adrian Brody for The Brutalist, a film that I think is going to be impossible to beat at the Oscars. After what we saw last night with Brody's really moving, memorable speech, with what we know about The Brutalist, which I'll get into, What happened on Sunday night to me crystallizes the Brutalist standing as the film to beat at the Oscars and throughout this awards show. And I think that was one of the takeaways of this Golden Globes. And for a complete unknown to have to hold its own against a film like The Brutalist is, for many reasons, a gargantuan task. So Timothee Chalamet, nominated, loses out to the 51-year-old Adrian Brody. Chalamet is only 29, and for reasons we'll get into, that might be part of the challenge that he faces this award season as well. Edward Norton, who plays Pete Seeger in A Complete Unknown, was met a similar Golden Globes fate. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor Drama, but lost to Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. Now, Kieran Culkin, the brother of Macaulay Culkin, is freaking brilliant, okay? One of my favorite films of all time is this film called Igby Goes Down, in which Kieran Culkin, alongside the likes of Claire Danes, Ryan Felipe, Jeff Goldblum, and Susan Sarandon, is absolutely mind-blowingly freaking brilliant in that film. You think about the actors that I just named. Kieran, at that time, this was, I think, 20 years ago this film came out, was a much less known commodity than he is now 20 years later. So at that time, at a much younger, much earlier period in his career, for him to be holding his own against the likes of a legend in Jeff Goldblum, a legend in Susan Sarandon, some veterans of the craft in Claire Danes and Ryan Felipe, it was immensely impressive. I'm not at all surprised to see Kieran, who works sporadically and seems to be very choosy with the roles he picks, celebrated most recently for his work in A Real Pain, and I'm happy to see it. Norton himself previously took home the Golden Globe in 1997 for his captivating turn in the film Primal Fear. That's how long Ed Norton's been at this. I mean, this man's he has been performing at an incredibly high level for an incredibly long time, which is one reason why it's so wonderful to see him celebrated for his stab at the character of Pete Seeger in A Complete Unknown. I've praised him to the hilt, as I have much of the rest of the acting in this film, albeit with all of my criticisms of the film's narrative, which were many and will always be many. The acting was brilliant throughout. The third and final nomination of the night for A Complete Unknown was Best Picture Drama. That honor went to The Brutalist. And perhaps that was part of the film's problem with respect to this award show, is contending with The Brutalist on its own turf in that particular category was not something that Searchlight Pictures was obligated to put the film through on this Golden Globes award night, but it chose to. And it may have proven to be, as the company backing this project, a little overconfident in that regard. The Brutalist is going to be very tough to beat. I'll get into my discussion of The Brutalist and Adrian Brody in a second here. But let's get into just how much buzz there was preceding the release of this film. I mean, for it to even be released as soon as it was something that in August 1st, 2024 Vanity Fair piece described as an earthquake heard round Hollywood. That was an earthquake initiated by Searchlight Pictures. With the sudden dating of A Complete Unknown, it's a buzzy Bob Dylan biopic helmed by Oscar nominee James Mangold, the director. Previously directed a music biopic in the Johnny Cash flick Walk the Line. Joaquin Phoenix nominated for Best Actor. Reese Witherspoon wins for Best Actress for her portrayal in that film as June Carter Cash. The film will be released this December, which is to say this award season. It completed production only recently. So you hear the rush to award season, the rush to the screen with this project. There are a number of reasons for that. James Mangold has discussed them in interviews that I've linked to in the descriptions of my prior videos on this topic. One of which was they just believed in this film. They felt they had something special. They wanted to get it out there now. The piece from Vanity Fair goes on to say the assumed approach would be that it would be taking this cycle off because of the timing with which production was completed. But as discussed in this week's Little Gold Men, listen below this. That's something that is linked to in this piece, which I'll link to myself in the description. You can check it out yourself. Mangold is a pro who knows how to work efficiently, and the studio must like what it sees enough to swiftly mount a campaign. Now, it wasn't just the studio that liked what it saw. The excitement reverberated out from this decision to rush A Complete Unknown to screen by Christmas Day in the same year in which production wrapped up. The Vanity Fair piece goes on to say this about Timothée Chalamet's role as Dylan. Dylan is played in the film by Timothée Chalamet in what could be the actor's first Oscar-nominated turn since his 2017 breakout in Call Me By Your Name, for which he also was nominated for a Golden Globe, by the way. There was also buzz about James Mangold heading into this award season and months before the film's Christmas Day release. This Vanity Fair piece says about him, for now, I'd suggest looking out for Mangold too. He directed Angelina Jolie to an Oscar 25 years ago for Girl Interrupted. The guy's been at it for at least as long as Ed Norton. And nearly 2 decades ago, helmed Walk the Line, a big awards hit with Reese Witherspoon, as I mentioned, winning that Oscar, and Joaquin Phoenix, let us not forget, nominated. That also inspired a beloved parody of the Cradle to Grave musical biopic Walk Hard, which, by the way, James Mangold himself has said in interviews he found to be hilarious. So he took the joke in stride when Walk Hard came out, parodying his approach to the music biopic. But Mangold was not recognized by the Academy until 2017's Logan, his gritty Wolverine drama that earned a screenplay nod. 2 years later, Mangold earned his first picture nomination for Ford v Ferrari, a film that was released to rave critical reviews. So you can see the momentum building for Mangold from project to project. He gets his first Best Film nomination for that film. Here we are, 8 years later, and people are thinking, this a complete unknown. Maybe this is finally going to be Mangold's ticket to the promised land that is winning that coveted Best Actor Oscar this time around. This story goes on to say this is a filmmaker who's been working at a consistently high level with tremendous industry goodwill, still seeking his first recognition by the director's branch. If this movie delivers as Searchlight certainly hopes it will, he could emerge as just as much of a story on the awards circuit as his superstar lead. Adam Bentz of Screen Rant said at the time as well, all around there's widespread excitement about Chalamet introducing Dylan to a younger generation. After Wonka and Dune Part 2, Chalamet is riding a hot streak at the box office, and with a praiseworthy performance as Dylan, A Complete Unknown should result in another Oscar nomination for Chalamet, and perhaps even his first win. Well, we'll know on January 17th when the Oscar nominations are released. We certainly know at this point that he was nominated for that Golden Globe, although he came up empty on Sunday night. Now, here's what probably is going to be the challenge, and what did not need to be the challenge at the Golden Globes, as I'll get into. But with respect to the Oscars, and as certainly was the case we now know at the Golden Globes Sunday night, The Brutalist may be impossible to beat. That might be one of the biggest takeaways, aside from the fact that Demi Moore won her award with that incredibly moving speech about how hard it was for her to believe in her ability to do what she did on Sunday night, which is win the first such award of her entire very long career. I think she said she's been at it for 45 years. She's 62 years old now. So there were just so many moving moments for the Golden Globes, an award show that has had its travails in recent years, as you probably know, and I think made a really stout comeback this past weekend, and I'm happy to see it as a longtime film lover myself. So The Brutalist, it goes to the Venice Film Festival, which in and of itself was a task, by the way, for reasons I'll get into. It wins the Silver Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival. It gets a 12-minute long standing ovation at that film festival, okay? And it's making these big, bold, grand gestures to the golden days of Hollywood's yesteryear in every conceivable way. It's shot using shot on 35 millimeter, okay? And there's a lot of people saying that who may or may not have any idea what the hell they're talking about. When you hear that, you're like, what the hell does that mean? I get it. So I did some digging for you to find the plainest explanation of the significance and rarity of that these days, and it came up with the following stuff that was posted about the unique approach to production that was taken for The Brutalist, which was shot using the VistaVision process and cameras and then released in 70 millimeter VistaVision. The film was shot horizontally on 35 millimeter film stock. You know that something interesting has occurred when people are talking about the meticulous details of the film's production in this way, okay? You know that there were some really grand, bold ambitions behind this project. The process provides a unique perspective and increased resolution, which is best seen on a large screen. The Brutalist, listen to this, was the first English language feature film to be shot in VistaVision since 1961's One-Eyed Jacks. This hadn't been done in 63 years. Okay? The film was released in 70 millimeters, which has the same height at the VistaVision frame. The director, Brady Corbett, said that 70 millimeter is the most accurate representation of the film with better definition and color separation between the foreground and background. This film, the lion's share of which takes place in the 50s, has a runtime of more than 3.5 hours with a built-in intermission, another grand gesture to the old days of cinema, right? It also gestures toward another much more recently celebrated film in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which in and of itself was this quirky, charming, warm, in its own way, as is always the case with a Quentin Tarantino film, celebration of Hollywood, particularly the old days. And with respect to that film, it was the days of Charles Manson in the mid to late 1960s. That, by the way, won Brad Pitt a Best Actor Oscar for his role. It was nominated 10 times at the Oscars. So Hollywood loves these films that celebrate Hollywood, okay? And that's one thing we learned from the celebration surrounding Quentin Tarantino's production, and I think it's another thing we learned here at the Golden Globes on Sunday night with Adrien Brody's win in this film, which does much the same in a very different way. The story of The Brutalist 2 is very reminiscent of the storyline that earned Adrien Brody his last Oscar, which was in 2003 for The Pianist. That was a Roman Polanski film, right? Where, again, in that film, as in this more recent one, he portrays a Holocaust survivor, a guy who, in that case, his story is based on a Holocaust memoir, The Pianist, The Extraordinary True Story of One Man's Survival in Warsaw, 1939 to 1945, by Vladislav Slipman. The Brutalist sees a Holocaust survivor trying to rebuild his life in America as an immigrant and as a visionary architect. That's the story that Brody embodies with this film. It's just, I think it enabled Brody to tap into some of that familiar territory that he handled so brilliantly with The Pianist more than 20 years ago now. So the ambitions of this film that A Complete Unknown is going to have to contend with, they're massive. Its tribute to old Hollywood is endearing, genuine, full-throated. Brody's speech at the Golden Globes, if you haven't seen it, you might want to check it out. He had that crowd in that room populated by some very influential, powerful people in Hollywood, and likely the TV audience at home eating out of the palm of his hand. I mean, listen to The Guardian's description of Brody's speech that night, and one wonders if Chalamet was melting into his seat as he watched Brody pull this off with the aplomb of a pro. The Guardian described his speech as catnip to the more than 10,000 Academy voters that will be voting, as opposed to the number of voters influencing the Golden Globes. As well as thanking the film's cast and crew, Brody thanked his partner, Georgina Chapman, who is the ex-wife of one Harvey Weinstein. Brody highlighted her resilience in particular, you think? His parents and grandparents, and further positioned the film as a story about the courage of immigrants to the U.S. and the power of creativity and art. Both, as The Guardian says, catnip to Academy voters. Now, if anyone in Hollywood has been through enough and therefore might be the object of no small degree of sympathy, compassion, and goodwill, it's most definitely the ex-wife of Harvey Weinstein. Okay, and I think that may be an interesting element too that could be playing into the film's favor and Brody's favor come Oscar night, and perhaps did during the Golden Globes. So it's foolish to say this far in advance that any film is a lock for anything at the Oscars, but in a contest between The Brutalist and A Complete Unknown, it might be surprising to see A Complete Unknown come out on top, if indeed it's nominated at all. Again, we'll know on January 17th. That's not to say there's no hope for A Complete Unknown at the Oscars. I'll get into that. I believe there still is. There's ample reason to believe that there is. But there may be a number of reasons why a complete unknown, this Bob Dylan biopic, hit some headwinds on Sunday night at the Golden Globes. For one thing, as this fascinating story from CinemaBlend, the link to which I'll post in the description of this video mentions, Hollywood doesn't like to have nominees sort of shoved down their throats. And there has been so much coverage of all the work Timothee Chalamet did behind the scenes, learn the harmonica, learn how to play guitar. COVID gave him the extra time. The writer's strike gave him the extra time to really learn that craft and hone his singing, hone his unique phrasing as he would have to do portraying a guy like Bob Dylan. That at some point you almost wonder if those with some influence in awards shows like the Golden Globes or the Oscars are kind of getting tired of hearing about it. You wonder that in particular because according to the CinemaBlend story, Ed Norton and Timothee Chalamet themselves are getting sick of it. There's this fascinating piece in which this source says apparently the studio wanted to, as part of its social media campaign for the film, record all the behind-the-scenes work of Chalamet trying to get into character as Bob Dylan. And Chalamet was having no part of it, much to the excitement of Norton, who also thought it was a terrible idea. You can read a portion of his quote below. Well, here's the portion of that quote. Ed Norton said this about the rejection of the studio's intended social media campaign promoting this film. Timothy did something I thought was really, really mature because they said to him, we just want to set up a time-lapse thing to watch you get into Dylan and the thing. And he said, no. First he said to me, what do you think? I said, absolutely not. And then they were like, but for social, for behind the scenes. No, absolutely not. I'm like, why? Why do you want to take away from an audience the opportunity to experience the mysticism, the trick, the suspension of disbelief? It's like, if we don't stop effing talking about how much time we spend in the makeup chair or how we learn the guitar or whatever, I'm just starting to feel all of us should leave people alone. Like, leave them alone. Let them watch the piece because I'm an audience member and I want mystery. I want illusion. Listen to Norton's language there. They're done with it. So one wonders the extent to which the near disgust that Norton is expressing there with the media going on with, all the Chalamet learned to play guitar and Monica Barbara played guitar and learned that and Ed Norton got to play Pete Seeger's 12-string banjo and all this stuff. You're like, all right already. They did their jobs. And you wonder if folks in Hollywood are starting to think the same thing and maybe they're weary of it. And could that? We're only speculating, albeit based on this printed story with quotes from one of the premier cast members, Ed Norton, who was nominated for a Golden Globe and came on empty on Sunday night. One wonders if this might be part of the headwinds that Chalamet and the film faced at the Golden Globes. Hollywood's just saying, I get it. Okay, you did this, that, and the other thing to prepare for the role. Great. That's what you're paid to do, right? I also wonder if Hollywood at this point may be growing weary of the music biopic genre as a whole. Take this, for example, from Ultimate Classic Rock. I mean, the biopic space, the rock biopic, has done very well at these award shows, but it's done very well now over a long period of time. And this onslaught, gathering onslaught, year after year, you turn your head, you blink, and there's a Bruce Springsteen biopic coming out, Jeremy Allen White. I'll get into it. It's like, oh God, all right, everyone. There's Selena Gomez is playing a Linda Ronstadt in a Linda Ronstadt biopic coming up. I've already talked previously about the Michael Jackson biopic, in which Jackson is portrayed by his totally inexperienced nephew, who has done nothing as an actor, and he's going to portray Michael Jackson. We've talked previously about the execrable treatment of Amy Winehouse in Back to Black, which was an utterly tragically forgettable biopic about her. So one wonders, is Hollywood getting sick of this treatment, formulaic as it's become in more recent years? I mean, look at all the awards and the honors that Hollywood has bestowed upon the rock biopic. As this story says from Ultimate Classic Rock, in 2019, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody earned Best Picture. Rami Malek won Best Actor for his portrayal of frontman Freddie Mercury. A year later, Taron Egerton won Best Actor for playing Elton John in Rocket Man. And at the same time, John and Bernie Taupin took home the Golden Globe for Best Original Song. I mean, There have been lots of awards wins, Oscar wins, and nominations in the rock biopic space. This piece from Vanity Fair points out that had Chalamet won a Golden Globe, he would have joined the likes of Austin Butler, Elvis Presley in Elvis, Jamie Foxx, Ray Charles in Ray, and Joaquin Phoenix, Johnny Cash in Walk the Line, as an actor who won a Golden Globe for playing a beloved real-life musician. As Daniel Montgomery said in GoldDerby.com last year, in the months leading up to A Complete Unknown's Christmas Day release, with all that buzz going on, he said, listen, playing famous musicians has resulted in Oscars for multiple actors. Jamie Foxx won for his role in Ray. Reese Witherspoon won for her role as June Carter Cash in Walk the Line. Renee Zellweger, remember, won the Oscar for her portrayal of Judy Garland in Judy in 2019. Then you look at the list of nominations. It's like Hollywood's like, all right, already. We've given you lots of noms and awards, and it's like maybe it's time for something different. And by the way, Todd Haynes took a big crack at something different with respect to the biopic with his film I'm Not There in 2007. Another Bob Dylan biopic. Cate Blanchett was among 6 actors to portray Bob Dylan throughout that film. I thought that was the perfect approach to a man as enigmatic and manifold in terms of his personality as Dylan is and always has been. Cate Blanchett was nominated for an Oscar for her role as Dylan in that film. Christian Bale, Marcus Carl Franklin, Richard Gere, Heath Ledger, and Ben Whishaw were all also part of that 6-actor ensemble, each of which took their own take on their own stab at the character of Bob Dylan throughout that film. Other actors to earn Oscar nominations for roles in music biopics. We already talked about Joaquin Phoenix. Don't forget Andrew Garfield as Jonathan Larson, the guy who wrote the Rent musical in TikTok Boom in 2021. Austin Butler's Elvis, we've mentioned. Bradley Cooper as Leonard Bernstein in Maestro in 2023. I mean, it's kind of a lot. Just in the last 4 years, you've had a lot of this stuff. And I wonder if Hollywood has reached this level of tolerance for the grand music biopic about a music legend. Are these directors banging on that same pedal one too many times for Hollywood's liking to this point? Could that be part of the headwinds that A Complete Unknown is facing in this award season coming up with going 0 for 3 on Sunday night at the Golden Globes? And as The Guardian points out also, music biopics are not always a sure thing. It's the space just might be coming too oversaturated for any given rock biopic to stand out in any given award season. This Guardian story puts it as follows. It's worth placing early bets on Deliver Me From Nowhere, the upcoming Bruce Springsteen film starring Jeremy Allen White. On Sunday, White took his 3rd consecutive TV Globe for his role in The Bear. Now, that's something only Michael J. Fox and Alan Alda had done previously, edging him into the early pole position for the 2026 race. Hold your horses. Hold on. Here we go again, right? Oh, Jeremy Allen White, Oscar nomination. The film is miles away from being released. And we're already making these insinuations about whether it's going to win. I mean, this is how it happened with A Complete Unknown. Months and months of as soon as the film is announced that it's going to be rushed to a Christmas Day release. Oh, Chalamet is going to win his first Oscar as for Best Actor or whatever. James Mangold finally going to win for, Best Picture. Why don't we slow down? Why don't we tread carefully before ramming this stuff down Hollywood's throat about who should or could or will win a given award? The Guardian wraps that point up in this nice little bow, puts a pin in it with this sentence. As Chalamet will have noticed, music biopics, even of adored icons, are not always a sure thing. And in fact, I would suggest perhaps they're becoming less of a sure thing as more and more of these things are churned out. Many of them, as I've said at length in prior videos on this channel, are mediocre at best. So, to some extent, we might have been deluding ourselves, those of us who shared the exuberance, as I admittedly did. In August, I posted a video expressing my exuberance in advance of this film. I'm taking in all this Oscar. I was thinking, wow, this must really be something special. Wow, they're rushing it to a December 25th release. And all these stories are coming out about Chalamet's brilliant as Dylan and James Mangold, all his experience. And maybe he's finally going to do it this time. I got caught up in it too. I freely admit that. But in retrospect, especially after Sunday night, I'm realizing, wait a minute, this film's got some headwinds that perhaps no one was anticipating, as we were all dancing to the same tune about all the Oscar buzz this film months before its release perhaps was worthy of. There's also this narrative that played out on Sunday night, which is a somewhat familiar one in Hollywood, whereby you have this breakout young star, Chalamet, 29 years old. This was his already at age 29, his fourth Golden Globe nomination, losing out to an established older veteran in Adrian Brody, who's 51 years old. Sometimes Hollywood's just sort of like, all right, kid, simmer down, check back in with us next time. You'll get your turn. Let's just slow your roll there, kiddo. Pat him on the back and wish him the best of luck in 2025 or 26, whatever Chalamet may have coming up. Wait your turn, Timmy. Which interestingly is how Brody referred to him from the stage during his speech. So, those are, I think, elements of the headwinds that perhaps might have been facing a complete unknown on Sunday night at the Golden Globes, and perhaps could reassert themselves during the Oscars. There's also this last point I would make, which is there's the possibility that Searchlight Pictures miscalculated with respect to its approach to the Golden Globes. I alluded to this earlier, that it wasn't necessary for Chalamet to even have to contend with Brody at this award show, but Searchlight Pictures forced the issue in a way that The Guardian describes as follows. The studio behind Bob Dylan biopic A Complete Unknown had sufficient faith in their film that they hastened its release by a year, therefore putting it and its star Timothee Chalamet in this year's awards conversation. Odd notices for both appear to have proved the wisdom of such a move, but Searchlight might just have tripped up at the final furlong by opting to place the film in the Best Drama category at the Globes rather than Best Musical or Comedy. The win for Adrian Brody in the former category on Sunday is a considerable blow for Chalamet's prospects, particularly as Brody used the podium to deliver such a compelling speech and therefore a convincing audition for his second Oscar win. All of which points to problems for Mr. Chalamet when the Oscars come around, okay? However, as I also alluded to earlier, there may yet be hope for Timmy, as Adrian Brody called him from the stage at the Golden Globes, which is this fascinating point that The Guardian makes about the political dynamic in the air at this very moment in Hollywood. Here we are, a couple weeks away from President Trump's nomination or inauguration, right, on January 20th. The election was certified yesterday. And within that context, listen to this point that The Guardian makes about how those events impact Hollywood at this moment. Trump's big win in November was a nasty surprise for the film and TV industry, not least because it demonstrated a complete collapse in the power of celebrity endorsement, as Nikki Glaser pointed out in her brilliant, hysterical monologue, by the way, as almost all of them vocally backed Harris. That the Globes chose to celebrate a nearly 4-hour drama about how the U.S. treats its immigrants, a largely Spanish language trans musical, as well as other films highlighting institutional corruption, the power of inclusivity, can be interpreted as pushback to the right-wing rhetoric of the incoming administration. But the Academy Awards, voted for by almost 10,000 more people, all of them hoping to find work during the next 4 years, are likely to skew less radical in their choices. That might speak to the favor of A Complete Unknown, which in comparison to The Brutalist is a decidedly more conventional experience as films go, in particular as rock biopic films go. Guarantee James Mangold wasn't cutting this film on 35 millimeter. Okay, that certainly isn't a part of the charm or feature of a Complete Unknown, even while it depicts a very bygone era, such as the one into which Dylan hitchhiked with a few bucks and a dream and nothing more in his favor as he emerged from Hibbing, Minnesota on the streets of Greenwich Village in New York City in January of 1961. There's also the point that, the Golden Globes are not necessarily some great predictor of success at the Oscars. As one piece puts it, it's not over for A Complete Unknown. Since 2010, with not just one but two Best Picture categories, the Golden Globes failed to match Oscars' ultimate Best Picture winner a whopping 7 times, just since 2010. Throw in Globe Best Picture nominees this year that got completely blanked, like A Complete Unknown, and that adds up to a 50% chance that some movie other than Emilia Perez or The Brutalist will land in the final winner's circle on March 2nd at the Dolby. The story goes on to say, since 2010, the list of Oscar Best Picture winners that did not also do the same at the Globes included that year's The King's Speech, 2014's Birdman, 2015's Spotlight, 2017's The Shape of Water, 2019's Parasite, 2021's Coda, and 2022's Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. In other words, the race to Oscar that just started in earnest on Sunday night did not end on Sunday night, but is just getting its mojo as 2024 seems particularly a year of uncertainty. And perhaps that is yet another big takeaway from Sunday night's Golden Globes, especially as it pertains to this biopic about Bob Dylan, A Complete Unknown, about which I've recorded 3 previous videos. Check those out for my perspective on the film. Vox in 2017 also addressed this question as to the extent to which the Golden Globes can be seen as any kind of reliable predictor of success at the Academy Awards, saying this: it's tempting to clock any film's trophy count at the Golden Globes as evidence that the Globes function as an Oscar predictor, as evidence of the Globes function as an Oscar predictor. That's a natural assumption because both shows honor movies with a glitzy, star-studded televised ceremony. Plus, the Globes take place about 2 months before the Oscars and kick off awards season that culminates with the Academy Awards. But is there really anything to the idea that the Globe results predict the eventual Oscar winners? Walt Hickley, writing at 538, noted that in 2013, the Golden Globes had a success rate of only 48% in predicting the Oscars' eventual Best Picture winner. That's not abysmal, but it's not great either. One of the issues, importantly, is structural, because this gets to what Searchlight Pictures could have done with A Complete Unknown. The Golden Globes gives out 2 Best Picture awards, one for drama and one for musical or comedy. That's the category into which Searchlight Pictures could have chosen to enter A Complete Unknown, but instead went for drama, pitting Chalamet directly against Brody to his detriment. While there's only one Best Picture Oscar, the awards for Best Actor and Best Actress are also split into drama and comedy musical categories at the Globes, but the supporting actor and actress categories, along with Best Director and Best Screenplay, are not. Similarly, while the Oscars separate screenplays into Best Original Screenplay and Best Adapted Screenplay, the Globes lump them all into one category. These disparities mean it's virtually impossible for the Globes to predict wins in a meaningful fashion. But the Globes nominations do tend to track near the Oscar nominations. We're just talking about nominations now, not wins, though there are always a few outliers. Since 2010, the Oscars have been able to nominate up to 10 films for Best Picture, making it technically possible for all 10 Golden Globe Best Picture nominees in both drama and comedy and musical to earn a Best Picture nod at the Oscars. So the bottom line, especially for those Dylan fans who are hoping for better for A Complete Unknown at the Academy Awards, maybe that there still is hope. You still have reason to hold out hope that A Complete Unknown is going to have a better night at the Oscars than it did on Sunday at the Golden Globes. We'll see. Keep your eye out for the nominations on January 17th. I can't imagine I won't post something about those nominations when they're released. We have Trent Reznor, by the way, winning a Golden Globe on Sunday night. I'd like to talk more about that in a forthcoming video as well. I hope you'll be back at The Curious Listener for those and much more that I have coming up on this and a variety of other topics. So thank you for stopping by. Cross your fingers for A Complete Unknown if you're a fan of Dylan, hoping for better things to come for the film going forward. There may well be ample reason to believe that better things may well be in store for A Complete Unknown here at only the very start of awards season for projects like rock biopics such as A Complete Unknown about the life and times of Bob Dylan.